My dear Theo, thanks for your nice letter and the 50-franc note. I have thought now and then that my blood is actually beginning to think of circulating, which is more than it ever did during that last period in Paris. I could not have stood it much longer. Down here it is freezing hard, and there is still some snow left in the country. I have a study of a landscape in white with the town in the background, then 2 little studies of an almond branch already in flower in spite of it. The studies I've done are an old Arlesian, a landscape in the snow, a view of a bit of a pavement with a pork butcher's shop. The women here are beautiful, no humbug about that. But on the other hand, the museum in Arles is a horror and a humbug, and ought to be in Tarson. There is also a museum of antiquities, but these are genuine. My dear Theo, this morning at long last the weather changed and turned milder, and likewise I have already had an opportunity to learn what a mistral is. I have been for several walks in the country hereabouts, but it is quite impossible to do anything in this wind. The sky is a hard blue with a great bright sun, which has melted almost all the snow, but the wind is so cold and so dry that it gives you goose flesh. As for my work, I brought back a size 15 canvas today. It is a drawbridge with a little cart going over it, outlined against a blue sky. The river blue as well, the banks orange, coloured with green grass, and a group of women washing linen in smocks and multicoloured caps. And another landscape with a little country bridge and more women washing linen. Also, an avenue of plane trees near the station. Altogether 12 studies since I've been here. Ever yours, Vincent. My dear Theo, I have just finished a group of apricot trees in bloom in a little orchard of fresh green. Thank you very much, too, for all the steps you have taken toward the exhibition of the Independence. I quite approve of your exhibiting the livres. Its title ought to be Roman Parisien. On the whole, I'm very glad that they've been put with the other Impressionists. But though it doesn't matter in the least this time, in the future my name ought to be put in the catalogue as I sign it on the canvas, namely Vincent, and not Van Gogh, for the simple reason that they do not know how to pronounce the latter name here. My dear Theo, I have been working on a size 20 canvas in the open air in an orchard. Lilac ploughland, a reed fence, 2 pink peach trees against a sky of glorious blue and white, probably the best landscape I have done. I had just brought it home when I received from our sister a Dutch notice in memory of Mauve, with his portrait, the portrait very good, the text, poor and nothing in it, a pretty watercolor. Something, I don't know what, took hold of me and brought a lump to my throat, and I wrote on my picture, Souvenir de Mauve, Vincent, Theo. I have another orchard as good as the pink peach trees, apricot trees of a very pale pink. At the moment I'm working on some plum trees, yellowish white, with thousands of black branches. I am using a tremendous lot of colours and canvases, but all the same I hope it isn't a waste of money. Out of 4 canvases, perhaps 1 at the most will make a picture, like the one for Tierstig or Mauve, but the studies, I hope, will come in handy for exchanges. I must also have a starry night with cypresses, or perhaps, above all, a field of ripe corn. There are some wonderful nights here. I am in a continual fever of work. My dear Theo, now I must tell you that I am working on the 2 pictures which I want to make copies of. The pink peach tree gives me the most trouble. You see from the 3 squares on the other side of this page that the 3 orchards make a series, more or less. I have also just now a little pear tree, vertical, between 2 horizontal canvases. That will make 6 canvases of orchards in bloom. I have 10 orchards now, not counting 3 little studies and 1 big one of a cherry tree, which I've spoiled. These orchards with the Pont de l'Anglais will make a first series. If you would rather leave them to dry out here, perhaps it would be as well. They are now on a covered terrace to dry. I say, Daumier is on view at the Beaux-Arts, and Gavarnie too, aren't they? Bravo for the Daumier, but not for the Beaux-Arts. Here is a sketch of an orchard that I planned more particularly for you to celebrate May 1st. It's absolutely clear and done all at once. A frenzy of impastos of the faintest yellow and lilac on the original white mass. I saw Bernard's still life unfinished and thought it magnificent. My dear Theo, well, today I've taken the right wing of this complex, which contains 4 rooms, or rather 2, with cabinets. It is painted yellow outside, whitewashed inside on the sunny side. I have taken it for 15 francs a month. Now my idea would be to furnish 1 room, the one on the first floor, so as to be able to sleep there. This house will remain the studio and the storehouse for the whole campaign, as long as it lasts in the south, and now I am free of all the innkeeper's tricks. They're ruinous, and they make me wretched. Just now Bernard writes me that he also has a whole house, but he has his for nothing. What luck. I hope I have landed on my feet this time. You know, yellow outside, white inside with all the sun, so that I shall see my canvases in a bright interior. The floor is red brick. Outside, the garden of the square, of which you will find 2 more drawings. I think I can promise you that the drawings will get better and better. Ever yours, Vincent. Now as for me, I am doing very well down here, but it is because I have my work here and nature. And if I didn't have that, I should grow melancholy. If work had any attraction for you where you are, and if the Impressionists were getting on, it would be a very good thing. For loneliness, worries, difficulties, the unsatisfied need for kindness and sympathy, that is what is hard to bear. The mental suffering of sadness or disappointment undermines us more than dissipation. Us, I say, who find ourselves the happy possessors of disordered hearts. I have done 2 still lifes this week. A blue enamel coffee pot, a cup on the left, royal blue and gold, a milk jug in squares of pale blue and white, a cup on the right of white with a blue and orange pattern on an earthen tray of grayish yellow, a jug in earthenware or maiolica, blue with a pattern in reds, greens, and browns, and lastly 2 oranges and 3 lemons. The table is covered with a blue cloth. The background is greenish yellow, so that there are 6 different blues and 4 or 5 yellows and oranges. The other still life is a maiolica pot with wildflowers. Bit by bit, as my blood quickens, the thought of success quickens too. I should not be greatly surprised if your illness were also a reaction from that terrible winter which has lasted an eternity. And then it will be the same story as mine. Get as much of the spring air as possible. Go to bed very early because you must have sleep. And as for food, plenty of fresh vegetables and no bad wine or bad alcohol, and very little of women. And lots of patience. My dear Theo, today I sent you some more drawings, and I am putting in another 2. These are views taken from a rocky hill slope, from which you see the country toward Crow. Very good wine comes from there. The town of Arles and the country toward Fonvier. The contrast between the wild and romantic foreground and the distant perspective, wide and still, with horizontal lines sloping into the chain of the Alps. I am trying now to exaggerate the essential and purposefully leave the obvious things vague. Odd, but one evening recently at Mount Majour, I saw a red sunset, its rays falling on the trunks and foliage of pines growing among a jumble of rocks, coloring the trunks and foliage with orange fire, while the other pines in the distance stood out in Prussian blue against a sky of tender blue-green cerulean. It was just the effect of that Claude Monet. It was superb. The white sand and the layers of white rocks under the trees took on tints of blue. What I would like to do is a panorama of which you have the first drawings. It has such breadth, and then it doesn't change into grey. It remains green to the last line, and then the range of hills, blue. If Gauguin wants to come here, the two of us will live on the same money that I now spend by myself. You know that I have always thought it idiotic the way painters live alone, etc. You always lose by being isolated. I have 2 or 3 new drawings and 2 or 3 new painted studies, too. If you saw the Camargue and many other places, you would be surprised, just as I was, to find that they are exactly in Ruysdael's style. I am working on a new subject, fields green and yellow as far as the eye can reach. I have already drawn it twice, and I'm starting it again as a painting. It is exactly like a Salomon conic. You know, the pupil of Rembrandt, who painted vast level plains, or it is like Michel or like Jules Dupré. Ever yours, Vincent. Instinctively these days I keep remembering what I have seen of Cézanne's, because he has rendered so forcibly, as in The Harvest we saw at Poitiers, the harsh side of Provence. It has become very different from what it was in spring. And yet I have certainly no less love for this countryside, scorched as it begins to be from now on. Everywhere now there is old gold, bronze, copper, one might say, and this with a green azure of the sky blanched with heat, a delicious color, extraordinarily harmonious with the blended tones of Delacroix. This last picture can bear the surroundings of red brick with which my studio is paved. When I put it on the ground with this background of red, very red brick, the color of the picture does not become hollow or bleached. The country near Aix, where Cézanne works, is just the same as this. It is still the Crow. If coming home with my canvas I say to myself, look, I've got the very tones of old Cézanne, I only mean that Cézanne, like Zola, is so absolutely part of the countryside and knows it so intimately that you must make the same calculations in your head to arrive at the same tones. Of course, if you saw them side by side, mine would hold their own, but there would be no resemblance. With the handshake, I hope that you will be able to write one of these days. Ever yours, Vincent. My dear Theo, I am at last writing to you from Saint-Marie on the shore of the Mediterranean. The Mediterranean has the colors of mackerel, changeable, I mean. You don't always know if it is green or violet. You can't even say it's blue, because the next moment the changing light has taken on a tinge of pink or gray. I brought 3 canvases and have covered them. 2 marines, a view of the village, and then some drawings which I will send you by post when I return to Arles tomorrow. Next week, I'd like to go to Tarascon to do 2 or 3 studies. One night I went for a walk by the sea along the empty shore. It was not gay, but neither was it sad. It was beautiful. The deep blue sky was flecked with clouds of a blue deeper than the fundamental blue of intense cobalt, and others of a clearer blue, like the blue whiteness of the Milky Way. In the blue depth, the stars were sparkling, greenish, yellow, white, pink, more brilliant, more sparklingly gem-like than at home, even in Paris. Opals, you might call them, emeralds, lapis lazuli, rubies, sapphires. The sea was very deep ultramarine. The shore is sort of violet and faint russet as I saw it, and on the dunes, they are about 17 feet high, some bushes Prussian blue. Now that I have seen the sea here, I am absolutely convinced of the importance